Okay, everybody. I'm doing this from my home computer, and I hope that the audio is as good as it is at work. But we're going to start with Chapter 23, Control of Kidney Function. And again, this should be reviewed from anatomy and physiology. You know that the kidneys process about 1,700 liters of blood a day, and they make waste products into about 1.5 liters of urine each day. The main responsibilities of the kidneys are filtration, reabsorption, to regulate blood pressure, and they also have endocrine function as well. And if you remember back to the regulating blood pressure, specifically if your blood pressure is low, remember that the kidneys will secrete renin, which activates the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. The kidneys are paired, bean-shaped organs that sit outside the peritoneal cavity in the back. The indented portion is called the hilus. They're basically divided into two different portions. You have the outer cortex, which is consists of the glomeruli, the convoluted tubules, and the blood vessels, and then the inner medulla, which contains your renal pyramid. The nephrons are the actual functional units of the kidney, and each kidney has about 1 million nephrons. Each nephron has its own glomerulus and its tubular component. The glomerulus is the high-pressure capillary system that works to either dilate or constrict in order to regulate the glomerular capillary pressure. It's encased in Bowman's capsule. Blood flows into the glomerular capillaries through the afferent arteriole and then goes out through the efferent arteriole into the tubular capillaries. And this is where blood is filtered. So you need to highlight that and remember that filtration really occurs in the glomerulus. Your tubular components, you have the proximal convoluted tubule, which drains Bowman's capsule, the loop of Henle, the distal convoluted tubule, the collecting tubule, and your filtrate has to pass through each one of those sections before it reaches down into the pelvis of the kidney. And again, this should be reviewed from anatomy and physiology, and you need to open up your book and remember the anatomy and how it works. There are two categories of nephrons. Cortical nephrons make up about 85%. They originate in the superficial cortex, and they have very short loops of Henle, barely reach into the medulla. Then you have the juxtamedullary nephrons. About 15% are juxtamedullary. They're deeper in the cortex. Of course, if they're deeper, they have longer loops of Henle that reach deep into the medulla. And these are largely concerned with urine concentration, the juxtamedullary nephrons. Urine formation depends on three different things, basically. Glomerular filtration, remember we said that filtration occurs in the glomeruli. Reabsorption that occurs in the tubules, and then secretion. So let's start with filtration. Urine begins with the filtration of fluid through those glomerular capillaries into Bowman's space. The filtrate itself is actually similar in composition to plasma, but it has less proteins in it. Your body makes about 125 milliliters of filtrate each minute, and that is what we call the glomerular filtration rate, or GFR. I'll refer to it that way. And that rate, that filtrate formation rate, can be affected by either dilation or constriction of either your afferent or the efferent arteriole as blood moves in the capillaries or as it moves out. Then that filtrate moves from Bowman's capsule down into your tubule segment of the nephron. And as it moves through those tubular sections, substances from the fluid are actually reabsorbed into the blood, and then some of the substances from the blood are reabsorbed into the filtrate. So basically anything that's useful for the body that can be reabsorbed out of that filtrate will be reabsorbed so the body can use it again. If it's considered waste or toxic and it's in the blood, then hopefully it will be reabsorbed from the blood into the filtrate so that it can then be excreted out as urine. 65% of all reabsorption and secretion processes occur in that proximal tubule. That's very important for you to remember. Water and urea is the end product of protein metabolism, are absorbed along concentration gradients. You've got sodium, potassium chloride, calcium phosphate, urate, glucose, and amino acids are reabsorbed via active transport. The water and urea are absorbed via passive transport. And if you remember, back in the early semester, we talked about the differences between passive and active transport with diffusion, osmosis, and the potassium pump there. I'm not necessarily concerned that you know which ones are passively or actively transported. Just understand that there are tons of different substances that are reabsorbed so that they can be used by the body or they can be excreted in the urine. Of that 125 milliliters filtration rate, or that filtrate that is formed each minute, only 1 milliliter of that is actually excreted in the urine. The other 124 mils, give or take, is reabsorbed in the tubule. So that shows you how much substance the body can reuse, which is a good thing. Okay, so just a quick review here. The kidneys filter the blood of all the waste and the toxic materials and then reabsorb any materials that they can that would be useful to maintain homeostasis or a good stable balance. They regulate fluid volume, they get rid of waste, they control our electrolytes, they help to maintain our blood pressure, and they assist with acid-base regulation, specifically with bicarbonate. Endocrine-wise, and this is just kind of a refresher here, remember that the kidneys work to maintain blood pressure through the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, specifically by sensing that the blood pressure might be low and secreting renin into the body, which activates the system. They also help to regulate red blood cell production because it is the kidney, again, that releases erythropoietin that stimulates red blood cell production in the bone marrow. And then they also increase calcium absorption by activating vitamin D, and that was in your musculoskeletal lecture just a few weeks ago, so that should be fresh on your brain there. The last thing I wanted to just bring out were some tests that you might see once you start going into the hospital and working. You'll see these different tests of renal function or kidney function. First of all, a urinalysis. I know everybody's had a urinalysis or seen that. There are lots of different things you can tell just by a urinalysis. You look at color. How clear is it? Does it have an odor? They can check white blood cells, protein. Lots of different things that you can tell just from a straight urinalysis. The next two values really show what your kidney function is. The first one is creatinine, and this really reflects what your glomerular filtration rate is. Creatinine is the product of creatine muscle metabolism, and it is supposed to be pretty much excreted by the kidneys or excreted in the urine. Your normal creatinine level in the blood should be 0.6 to 1.2. So if that level goes up in the blood, then you realize that your filtration system in the kidney is not working the way it's supposed to. Just to give you an example, if your creatinine were to double, say to 2.4, then you can pretty much bet that your filtration rate and your kidney function are about half what they're supposed to be. So again, that gives you a good value Now, does that necessarily mean if your creatinine goes up, you have kidney damage? Not necessarily, because there are other things that can cause your creatinine to go up, such as if you're severely dehydrated. So you have to kind of look at the patient and look at the history. The other important value is blood urea nitrogen. We call this the BUN. You'll see it BUN and creatinine all over the place for the rest of your nursing career. And this is the byproduct of protein metabolism that you find in the liver. And it's supposed to be completely excreted by the kidneys. I think your BUN level in the blood should be 10 to 20, if I'm not mistaken. So again, if that level goes up in the blood, then you know that your kidneys are not working appropriately to get rid of that waste. So again, you're showing what your kidney function actually is. And this is the end of chapter 23, and we'll move on to 24.